let's take a look first of all at something like number 33 on page 296. All right, so starting with number 33. All right, so 33, the problem reads, what's the antiderivative of the sine of 2x? All right, what's the antiderivative of the sine of 2x? Now, before we begin this problem, some things that you might need to know is that the antiderivative of the sine of just the x is negative cosine x. All right, plus c. All right, negative cosine x. All right, so you would need to know that. You would need to know that. So now you want this to look like that. So what you could do is use this technique called substitution. You could make u equal to 2x. And then you'd have to take the derivative of u, which is 2 dx. And now what you're going to do is take the antiderivative of the sine of not 2x, but the sine of u, du, sine of u. So now what you have is you have the sine of u du, but in that du is a 2. So what you can do is multiply your problem by half. And what you have is you have the antiderivative of the sine of u is 2x, du, which has a 2 in it, you multiply by half, that will get rid of that 2 that was in the du, and now what you'll discover is this is the same thing as this. 1/2 sine of u du is the same thing as that. And now what you can do is take the antiderivative of the sine of u, and I just told you that the antiderivative of sine is negative cosine. All right, so now what you have is the antiderivative of the sine of u is negative cosine of u. And you bring down the half. Let's get rid of that. The antiderivative of the sine of u is negative cosine u plus c, and you end up with negative half cosine of u, you put 2x back, plus c, final answer. Final answer. Okay, so that's our first problem, taking the antiderivative where we have to use a technique called substitution. All right, so the thing that I'd like to communicate to you, and what I share with my students all the time, is how to study for math. The way you study for math is different from the way you study from history. The way you study for math is different from the way you might study for English or Spanish. The way you study for math, and you listen to me very carefully, is you have to do problems. You have to do this problem. All right, let's say your test was how to take an antiderivative. You have to do a lot of antidifferentiation problems. All right, so I just did number 33 on page 296, and 33 in the back of the book, which it was an odd problem. It says negative half cosine 2x plus c. All right, negative half cosine 2x plus c. All right, and what we're going to do is do problem after problem after problem. We're going to do problem after problem after problem. Anti-differentiation problem after anti-differentiation problem after anti-differentiation problem. And we'll get the same answer, we'll get the correct answer, and that's called studying. And we're going to study. I tell my students all the time, when there's an important test that I want to take, there's a stack of problems that I've done. This is of above and beyond the homework. And there's a stack of problems that I've done, I've practiced. And then you get the correct answer, making sure you do problems where you know what the answers are. I just looked in the back of the book. And then you get the correct answers correct, and that verifies that you're ready to take that test. Let's look at another one. 35. The problem is, for 35, is what's the antiderivative? I'm on page 296 for my students, of 1 over theta squared cosine of 1 over theta d theta. All right, so we want you to take the antiderivative of that. Now again, it would be good for you to know that the antiderivative of the cosine of u is just the sine of u plus c. All right, so you'd have to know that coming in. You'd have to know that. And then what you could discover is that over here, you could make u 1 over theta, which is the same thing as theta raised to the negative 1 power. All right, and then du, the derivative of u, would be negative 1 theta raised to the negative 2 power, d theta. All right, that's the same thing as negative 1 over theta squared d theta. All right, so now what you can do is you can take the antiderivative of cosine to the 1 over u, cosine of 1 over u, cosine of 1 over u, which we called u, cosine of u. And then over here you have du being negative 1 over theta squared, where you don't want that negative. That negative is not in this problem. So let's multiply by a negative to get rid of the negative that was in du. All right, so we have the cosine. We need the cosine of 1 over theta. So we have the cosine of u. U is 1 over theta. Du. All right, so we have du. Over here we have du as 1 over cosine, 1 over theta squared. Well, we need that 1 over theta squared, so that's why it's good to have that du there, but we don't need the negative. That's why I have this negative over here to cancel out this negative here. All right? Now you need to take the antiderivative. You need to take the antiderivative of the cosine of u. And you know that the antiderivative of the cosine of u is the sine of u plus c. Let's drop that negative down. The antiderivative of the sine, I told you, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, forgive me. The antiderivative of the cosine was sine, forgive me. All right, so the antiderivative of cosine was sine. So now, of u plus c. So now we have a negative sine of u. U was 1 over theta plus c. All right, and that's our final answer. That's our final answer. That's our final answer. That's where you would stop. So again, what I'm going to do is check in the back of the book. I'm on page 296. I'm looking at number 35, and the answer is negative sine of 1 over c plus c. Excuse me, negative sine of 1 over theta plus c. All right, negative sine of 1 over theta plus c. As you are studying, by studying I mean you're doing problems, you're doing more and more problems. As you're studying, you're now building up your confidence. You're building up your confidence. Everything that you're studying and practicing, you're getting right in the back of the book. You're ready for your test. I'm doing calculus, but you might be doing algebra. You might be doing geometry. You do odd problems in your geometry textbook. You do odd problems in your pre-calculus textbook. You ask your teacher, what's the test on? And then once they tell you what's the test on, you go to the book and you do odd problems on those subjects that your teacher says you'll be tested on. And then you'll be ready. Let me show you what you should not do. This is what you should not do. These are your notes. These are your notes. Well, I remember when we did that 3 weeks ago. I remember when we did that last week. That's what I'm going to do. No, you're not going to do that. You'll forget. That's why you got to study. Everybody has to study. Everybody, the way you get better is you practice. You want to get better at basketball, you practice. You want to get better at dancing, you practice. The reason why you're such a good dancer is because you dance so much. You practice. How do you dominate math? You practice math. And then you get better. Every time. I don't care what it is. Man, I'm getting excited, man. If you hear what I'm saying, you're going to dominate math. You practice. And you never quit. Never.